Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Neitzel Mods. Today I'm going to be showcasing this arcade cabinet right here. This started its life as a Konami 4-player X-Men, I believe. It says it on the back here. Yes, X-Men. This arcade cabinet is going to be a project for my buddy Jeff. He told me that he wanted an arcade cabinet, he likes Godzilla a lot, and he said go wild and make it unique. Gave me free reign for everything else. Some of the plans for this arcade cabinet, I'm going to try to fill the screen space as much as I possibly can. I might have to do some tricks there to get that screen to fit. I'm going to have really unique artwork, really unique lighting, stuff that I've never really seen done. I'm not saying it hasn't been done, I'm just saying I've never seen it. First thing I got to do is sand all of this Bondo off. This back door definitely needs some work. That's got to go, holy smokes. Another thing that's got to get fixed is the bottom of the cabinet. You know, there's quite a bit of Bondo here. I could sand all that down, but honestly, this is pretty much beyond saving. So let's go ahead and get started.
So I started by sanding down the Bondo off of the side of the cabinet. There were high spots that needed to be sanded down, whether that be from water damage or just from years of being in the elements. But the bigger issue that I encountered when I was sanding things down was with the Bondo itself. This was completely filled over and I tried to sand it, and it turns out that whoever tried to do this before didn't mix any hardener into this Bondo, and it basically just has like the consistency of bubble gum. And you can see me digging that out right there and having to sand it down, and that will eventually get filled in as well. That half-done Bondo was actually all over the cabinet. There was some on the front right here. You can see me digging that out, as well as the control panel. Right here I had to cut a piece of the back of the cabinet off because it was broken, and I was making a new back door anyway, so that wasn't a big deal. But here's more of that half-done Bondo that just easily scraped off. I had to sand the whole control panel down, fill in a bunch of spots, replace some MDF, put some wood filler in there. It was a lot of work, but I also sanded down the entire cabinet before I primed and painted it.
The next thing I want to do is make some wood filler. The way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to make some sawdust first, and then I'm going to add some wood glue. Mixing the two together will basically just be making some MDF, because that's practically what MDF is just a bunch of sawdust pressed and formed with glue.
I put quite a bit of that mixture on the cabinet and on the control panel and anywhere else that needed to be filled. I did put a little too much on, but I learned a valuable lesson on how much to put on there because it was way too much sanding. Okay, so here's the consistency of that filler. Looks pretty gnarly. Down here, you can see where I smoothed it out, sanded it all down, and all this spot, this light coloring right here, that's where the filler still is. So there actually was quite a bit of material to fill in that was missing out of the back and actually all over this cabinet. So I'm going to continue sanding, and we're going to see how this turns out. So after sanding off all that homemade Bondo, I still needed to do quite a bit of finishing work to get everything really smooth. So I went to the store and I bought some actual store-bought wood filler, which is much better for finishing work, and then went ahead and sanded all that down before I primed and painted it.
Okay, so the hardest part of this, I believe, is over. There's still a few little finishing touches that I'm going to have to do. Today, the goal is to get the casters on the bottom of it. These are the Harbor Freight casters that I got. I think they were like $3 a pop or something. I got an extra one just in case one breaks or anything. These are going to do the trick without raising it too high off of the ground.
I actually forgot to get a shot of me cutting the bottom of the cabinet off, but that MDF was trash. There was no saving that stuff. And then I also had to cut a piece of thin particle board that is going to cover the front of the cabinet. I'm not using coin doors. I'm going to be using some art instead.
Now comes the fun part of designing the control panel here. So if you look at the original one, I used it as a template for this one right here. All I have to do is get another piece of MDF and then run it across the top right here to fill that gap.
So I measured and cut that. I wood glued it to the control panel I made, and then also made a curve with some of that wood filler I made as well. Right now I'm cutting the 45s that are going on the front of this. And those are gonna look really good right there after they get mounted and painted and everything. So after I screwed those down, I also mounted that piece of particle board that I cut earlier. That's where the art is going to be mounted to. And then I also had to cut some pieces to go along the bottom to reinforce the MDF that I had previously cut off, and then also give me a place to mount the LEDs that were going underneath there as well. I filled in all of the spots that needed more filling with some more of that store-bought wood filler after I added the wood to the bottom, and then got to work on the control panel. Right here, I'm making the top of the control panel hinge so I can lift it up to work on it, but also give Jeff a easy way into the cabinet. Well, I got the hinges set up. It's working properly. You can lock these out if you want to. It's really, really stable. It's on there pretty good. And I just realized maybe I shot that whole thing with my head cut off. Right here, I'm cutting the sides off of the frame for the 32-inch panel that's going inside of the cabinet. The width of the panel was actually only about 1/4 of an inch shorter than the entire width of the cabinet itself. So it took quite a bit of work to shave the sides of that cabinet down to get it to fit, and then wood glue the sides also to keep it nice and strong. Right here, I'm disassembling the Golden Tee plug and play that's going in the center of the control panel. And you might be thinking to yourself, why are you using a plug and play instead of just using a USB trackball and then running that through a Raspberry Pi and all that? Yeah, you know, I could have done that, but I gave Jeff that Golden Tee plug and play years ago when he told me that he wished he could have had a Golden Tee cabinet in his house. At the time, that wasn't a feasible option for him, so I found this, I think at a yard sale, and then gave it to him, and him and his wife got a whole lot of enjoyment out of that. But I was able to cut it down and get it to fit right there in the middle of the arcade cabinet after routing it out. I also had to cut holes in the control panel for the joysticks to go through. I didn't want to mount them to the bottom of a 3/4 inch MDF, so I routed the top out so they could be flush mounted. And then I also had to drill holes for Golden Tee for all of the controls that go along with that. Okay, so this is the artwork that I was going to go with, but my buddy Wes is an awesome graphic designer, and he just sent this over. Look at that. I'm going to use the projector to project this. Unfortunately, I have already drawn on both sides of my cabinet, so I'm just going to trace over it. So I used a projector to project the image that Wes had sent over, traced all of that out, drilled a bunch of holes in the side of the cabinet, and then connected all those holes with my jigsaw. I also had to file all of the rough edges down before I went ahead and filled it, and then sanded all of that filler down and primered it. And there was a lot of work that went into making the cutouts that I added to the side of the panel look as professional as possible. Then I went ahead and primered the entire cabinet, as you can see right here. And then on the inside of the cabinet, I had to make that white for the LEDs to reflect off of. After that, it was just painting the side of the cabinet with its first coat of black, and then also countersinking the buttons for Golden Tee. Right here, I'm filling in some of the MDF that's in the speaker hole, since light is going to go through there, and I want that to look really nice and not see any imperfections of that light coming through. Sanding more of that filler down that's in the Japanese on the side, and then filling any imperfections that kind of came to light after I had painted it black. So I ended up sanding the entire cabinet down and then adding a few more coats of black to make sure that everything looked as nice as possible before I did the rest of the artwork and the rest of the paint on the side. I painted the Japanese on the side and then taped it off because I needed to add the artwork for Godzilla on top of that. It was time for round 2 of using the projector to get the artwork on here, so what I did was I taped everything off. I traced out the image that was being projected onto that tape and then carefully cut everything out with an X-Acto knife and then added more tape so that I could paint. So I have all this taped off right now, and as you can see, I did like stippling with a sponge brush all the way around here. All I did was I spray painted it and then hit it with a brush like this. I went bloop, 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 bloop. And then it put those little dots in there. So that'll hide all those imperfections underneath of it, and then it'll give Godzilla like a really cool textured feel to it. The next step for me was to build the reflective panels that are going to be mounted inside of the arcade machine. I'm going to be wiring up a lot of LEDs inside of this machine, and I want to give them something to reflect off of. So what I did was I sanded down these pieces of MDF, primered them, cut them to shape to go inside of the cabinet, and then I painted them red to match the rest of the aesthetic of the cabinet, but also give them something shiny to reflect off of. Then I had to remove the tape off of Godzilla and then completely tape over him again and then trace him out again for the red that was going on top.
Oh shit. Yeah, look at that. Awesome. Woo, load her up, buddy. Ow! Cool. Hell yeah, dude. I'm gonna throw my freaking arm out doing this. Man, that looks cool. Yeah. Damn it. That was supposed to go here. Oh, sick.
Okay, what did I learn from doing the back? I think I put a little too much here. A little goes a long way, but I'm glad I practiced on the back. I really liked the effect that the really heavy sprays had over just doing a lot of light stuff.
That's the good stuff. That's what I'm looking for.
Here, let me grab the camera. The back looks absolutely crazy, but the top, I think I prefer the style of the top a little bit more pronounced, like splatter, and then like small little sprays around it.
So I applied what I learned doing the back door and the top of the cabinet to the front right here, got a little more practice before I moved on to the speaker grills, and then after I had perfected the technique, I moved on to the side of the cabinet, and let me tell you, this was just so much fun to do. It was really rewarding to see it all coming together.
Okay, so this is the moment of truth. I guess it's time to get to it. Wow, this looks absolutely incredible. I'm blown away. Yeah, a few spots to fix, but for a garage job and Dollar Tree masking tape, a old projector, and a Windows XP laptop, I didn't do too bad on this.
So since the paint job was done for the most part on the cabinet, the next step was to move on to making the control panel. So I had to drill all these holes out in the plexiglass, and then I applied that same exact splatter technique to the underside of the plexiglass, and then after that was dry, I applied flat black on top of that. Then I went through quite a few cans of automotive clear coat to cover the entirety of the cabinet, not only to protect it, but to make that paint job really shine.
The clear coat is done. It is all over everything and all over me. But I got everything cleared. Check this out. Here is the control panel. Look at that. That is absolutely killer. It's gonna look really, really good. How you doing? So this is the center strip. This one's gonna be mounted in the front of the arcade cabinet, and then when it's in sound activated mode, it's going to work its way from the front and then up the sides and eventually to the top of the marquee. So I have these cut and then labeled with numbers and letters so I can solder them back together in order. The speakers are going to be offset with a piece of MDF that I cut, and then I can line the inside of this with the lighting as well. So what's left is this strip of 3 right here and this strip of 3 right here, and then those are going to be cut, and that's going to be what lights up the marquee at the top. So I have all this taped off exactly the way that I want these lights to be installed, and then also they're individually lettered all the way up, since I do want it to go from the bottom up. So there's going to be a way that these LEDs are oriented, but also the way that they are wired up as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on sticking these on there and making sure that this design works, and then I can mirror it for the other side.
Since I had all of the pieces cut and labeled, it was really easy to peel the tape off and then put them on there. The design I had in mind worked, so I went ahead and copied it over to the other side. There was still quite a bit of work to do in the garage before I moved the cabinet inside. This was like the dead of summer when I recorded this. It was so hot out there. So I made the marquee. I later painted that white to mount LEDs to, built a frame on the bottom of the arcade cabinet to give the LEDs something to reflect off of, and then I routed out the control panel to stick the T-molding inside of as well.
So I managed to get the arcade cabinet into my home arcade. If you haven't seen a lot of these machines, I have another video up on my channel explaining all the custom ones that I've done, but that's not important. What is important is that it is 100 degrees outside and I need to wire all of these LEDs up.
This step I wouldn't call difficult. I would say it was more time consuming than anything. Since I had everything labeled on the inside of the cabinet, all I needed to do was just connect all the wires to all the points that I had labeled, but I think I calculated right around 200 connections that I had to solder together, so it was pretty arduous.
First test of the sound reactive LEDs looks like it is going super well. It's reacting to my voice awesomely. I'm gonna have to put the side panels in and then actually play some music and give this thing a shot.
Drop.
Okay, so here's the speaker in its riser with the LED lights. I have these wires run, and then I have them labeled, since I won't be able to see what's on the inside of here, which wires the data goes through, which wires the 12 volts goes in, and the ground and everything like that. If I seem tired, I am. I've been working on this a lot. Not trying to seem unenthusiastic about the build. I am really excited, but this has been a long time coming. After I get these speakers in here, that is the last bit of wiring I had to do to test out all of the lighting for the marquee speakers underneath. I got all that done. I ran the wires down the cabinet and out the bottom. These two are for data and these two are for power and ground. So my buddies are gonna help me finish wiring this up and then I can test it out.
The artwork on the front of the cabinet was just a poster that I ordered off of eBay, and then I mounted that to the particle board with some double-sided tape and covered it with some plexiglass. Then I applied the same exact paint job to the marquee cover and then painted that black as well. While I waited for that to dry, I got the control panel mounted next and got the buttons mounted, as well as started on some of the wiring underneath of it.
Okay, so the control panel is in. I like this spacing, how I did everything here, and the trackball spins nicely. I have these buttons recessed so you don't press them when you're playing Golden Tee. But yeah, I'm really happy with how this turned out. I still need to do some T-molding across the front here. Hi, you want some attention too? Hi, buddy. I'm gonna get the marquee going here. Where the heck did I put that? So I got this painted. You can see that I taped it off. This is where the artwork is gonna go. Fantastic.
Those sound reactive LEDs look great behind the marquee and in the speakers. Those are individually controlled by an app over Bluetooth, so you can turn the speakers or the marquee off and on during gameplay too.
Okay, so the screen is in. That was super tough. I think there's a reason. I've personally never seen somebody put a 32-inch TV into one of these Konami cabinets because it was a nightmare. And I still have to make a bezel for it. And then there's also a gap back here that I need to make a little piece of wood to cover it up. But I'm really, really happy with how this looks. Holy smokes, I can't wait to turn this thing on.
Since I had to cut down the frame of the TV to get it to fit inside of the arcade cabinet, I had to do the same exact thing to the bezel to get it to fit, and it was actually pretty easy to do. Then after that, I started wiring up the Golden Tee plug and play underneath, as well as all the arcade buttons. Off camera, I did the same exact blood splatter paint job that I did to the cabinet on the bezel, and then I went ahead and worked on a few other things like some wiring, some bezel work right here, as well as painting this filler piece to fill in this negative space behind the TV.
After some initial testing with these speakers right here, turns out they didn't sound as good as I thought they would. So I found these black and red speakers in my pile of speakers that I have. This isn't originally how the speaker was mounted in here, but what this will do is allow me to mount it inside of the cabinet with no modifications to the cabinet itself.
The new black and red speakers look really good behind the grill right there and match the paint job nicely. So next I went ahead and started 3D printing some cup holders that are going to be mounted to the side of the machine. So I sanded down the cup holders. You could see that out of the 3D printer, this one had a whole lot of lines on it, and then this sanded down pretty nicely. So I'll just have to prime and paint that, get these mounted to the arcade cabinet. What are you eating? Lucius! What is that, dirt? Come on, man. So after sanding, I primered them, painted them black, did the same exact red splatter paint job on there, and then mounted them right behind the control panel. So it's finally done, but it's about 2 o'clock in the morning, so I'm gonna get some sleep. I will take some more footage tomorrow when I'm rested up and show off the cabinet in all of its glory. I'm super excited to finally deliver it to Jeff after the close to 4 months it took me to build this in the middle of a pandemic, and I have a full-time job as well as a factory worker, so it's pretty tough to find the time to put all this stuff together, but I'm again really happy with how this turned out, and I really appreciate you sticking around this long in this video. I know it's been a long one, but if you like what you see, please go ahead and subscribe, and I'll have more builds like this coming up in the future.